This is 𝗦𝗲𝘱 in Chicago, and you are watching my channel, Knowledge for Quality of Life. Friends, I really appreciate to all those who have subscribed to the channel, and I would request you to share as much as possible with your friends, families, and loved ones, because the information which I'm sharing here is knowledge, actually. That information which is available in the literature, I have utilized for myself and my family. I have seen the results, and I can vouch and validate that information. And last time we spoke about the conditions of metabolic syndrome. So out of those 5 factors which I have gone through in the last vlog, the 5th one, if you recall, was related to impaired glucose. And I said that, in the next vlog, I will share some more information on that. So today's topic is purely on that once we have identified ourselves that, 3 of the 5 criteria which we fulfill, let's say, God forbid, and if we are having a metabolic syndrome, because this metabolic syndrome eventually will lead to insulin resistance. So we want to make sure that we are in the camp of insulin sensitivity. We are not insulin resistance. First, we need to test it ourselves. So I'm going to share some information, certain tests, which I have done myself, and I can vouch for it and validate that, it's very fruitful to see things in the complete perspective. Because if you look at just one or the other test, then it doesn't give you the complete picture. So let me share my screen with you. So I have consolidated a ton of information here, different criterias. So if you look at the first one, which says fasting blood glucose, which our doctors normally test if we go to the test, and we don't have to ask most of the time to test for fasting blood glucose. This is part of the complete metabolic panel. So if you look at the fasting blood glucose, it's almost always there. And normally we have to fast for 10 to 12 hours. And when we go, they draw the blood and, they report the results. So if it's less than 100 milligrams per deciliter, it's considered as a normal. Pre-diabetes is between 101 to 125, and greater than 126 is declared as a diabetes. This is one measure to look at the fasting blood glucose, that, how we are doing on the fasting state. But remember that, blood glucose is a very dynamic parameter. Throughout the 24 hours, it changes, it varies depending on whether we eat or we don't eat, because our mental stress affects certain hormones, which impedes the blood glucose as well. So it's a very dynamic, parameter, and we cannot just base our decision that somebody is normal or pre-diabetic or diabetes, just by that one measure. Second one, which normally doctor looks at it, is HbA1c. That's a hemoglobin A1c. It gives you instead of 12-hour fasting blood glucose, it gives you a little bit longer picture, which is based on almost 3 months average. So basically, our glucose gets into the red blood cells, and over the period of time, they measure this HbA1c. So HbA1c is a good indicator for about 3 months. But if you look at both the indicators, fasting blood glucose and HbA1c, they are both measuring or they are telling us the story about our blood glucose. We are not even looking at that how insulin is doing. So basically, I told in the previous vlog, I mentioned this thing, that when we eat something, anything we eat, body gets digested, and the glucose comes into the blood, and then pancreas gets a signal that some glucose is there, and pancreas releases the insulin, and insulin comes to rescue the glucose and sends to the cell, opens the door for the cells, and glucose should belong to the cell, and then it's used as an energy. So it shouldn't float around in the arterial system, in the blood, because if it does, then it's a problematic. So what we need to do is we need to check that what is the resting condition, what is the fasting condition, how our insulin is doing. So there is a test for that, when we go for blood glucose in the fasting state, they draw the blood glucose. They also can draw the fasting insulin. You have to ask this test from your doctor that I need to get my fasting insulin tested. Once you get the fasting insulin, and if you look at that, I illustrated here, I wrote it down, HbA1c 5.6%. It's expressed in the percentage form. Less than 5.6% is normal, 5.7 to 6.4 is prediabetes, and greater than 6.5 is considered as a diabetic. And of course, once these two parameters are set, wherever we are standing, doctor is going to prescribe us certain measures, or even we are full-blown diabetic, they're going to prescribe either metformin or some kind of a drug to maintain our blood glucose. But we have to look at the bigger picture, that what is the state of our insulin. So we don't want to reach to that level, and these further tests down the line, which I'm going to be discussing a little bit more, that when we are in the borderline, particularly a lot of people are on the borderline without knowing that they carry the pre-diabetic condition, because doctor says that you are okay, and once you are above 125, 126, then God forbid somebody is declared that you are now diabetic and you have to take the medication. Because I was in that boat. My blood glucose years ago, it's been hovering around between 102 to 105, and I was not happy with that. My HbA1c was around between 5.6 and 5.8. I was not very happy with it. So I started digging the literature, and I found this information, and I have gone through each and every test and calibrated myself that what my insulin is doing. So I looked at my fasting insulin, and normal range for fasting insulin is between 1.9 to 23, depending on the lab where you are getting tested, because every lab has established their normal range. But they say fasting insulin, experts say that it should be between 2 to 5 is the optimal number. You don't want to have too much fasting insulin, even though it says that normal range is up to 23, but you don't want to have inadequate enough fasting insulin in the fasting state. Your insulin is floating around, and that could lead to other complications down the line. So once you have these two numbers, fasting blood glucose and fasting insulin, we can calculate the HOMA-IR. HOMA-IR is an acronym for homeostatic model assessment of insulin resistance. Now remember that as soon as our system sends the blood glucose, the insulin comes to the rescue and tries to balance it out in a natural state. That's how the nature has given this hormone to us, which our pancreas generates, in the form of insulin. And if you recall from my previous vlogs on vitamin D, that vitamin D plays a very important role in keeping the beta cells, which gets the signal generated, for the insulin to be released. And beta cells has a VDR attached to it. I mentioned in my previous vlogs on vitamin D that vitamin D is the raw material for these beta cells. Now, beta cells is in the pancreas, which regulates the insulin. So if your insulin is regulated better, it means that your beta cells are active and working, and your pancreas is putting the output the way nature has designed. So what you do that, once you have the fasting blood glucose from your test and you have a fasting insulin, you plug into this equation, HOMA-IR equals to fasting blood glucose, multiply by the fasting insulin, and divided by, you multiply these two numbers, and whatever the results you get, you divide by 405 when you are working in blood glucose in milligrams per deciliter. For folks who are working in the SI units, international units, their blood glucose is normally measured in millimoles per liter. They need to use this equation. The factor in the denominator is going to be 22.5. So fasting blood glucose times fasting insulin divided by 22.5 for SI units. Now, once you get this HOMA-IR number, if HOMA-IR is less than 1.5, it means that one is insulin sensitive. Ideally, optimally, it should be less than 1. That's the target which we are trying to target. That's the ideal number to have, less than 1. But up to 1.5, one can be defined as insulin sensitive. But if HOMA-IR gets greater than 1.9, then you are somewhere in insulin resistance category. Means you are in the pre-diabetic condition. And if HOMA-IR is greater than 2.9, it's high insulin resistance. It means that one is probably a full-blown diabetic. Now these numbers are, remember that I said in my previous vlogs that insulin resistance is a state of the condition. Metabolic syndrome, which we discussed last time, is a state of the condition. It's completely reversible. It's a lifestyle issue. It's not a disease. And we are not talking right now that how to fix or how to treat that. We are just trying to highlight those elements that we can define ourselves, the criteria that where we are standing in a report card basis. All right. So this HOMA-IR is one of the best indicator to see that how your blood glucose and your insulin is acting together to keep this homeostatic condition of your body in a balanced way between the insulin and the blood glucose. Now, the next one is OGTT, the next test. This is another measure, is OGTT 2-hour. OGTT stands for Oral Glucose Tolerance Test. And they monitor, so the way this test works, that when you go to the lab for your testing, of course, you need to have 12-hour fasting. They draw your blood glucose. So they draw the first time the blood glucose, and that blood glucose is going to be a fasting blood glucose. So it should be less than 100, as we defined here, to be a normal. Then they give you about 75 milligram of glucola or 100 milligram of glucola. It's a pure glucose syrup, and they give you a couple of seconds to gulp it down, and then they make you sit outside, and they time it that, from the time you finish that glucola, they time it 2 hours. And then once the 2-hour alarm goes on, and then the technician is going to come and draw your blood again. Now, what they're trying to see here, that, as soon as you gulp down that glucola, that glucose syrup, of course, your body got some extra glucose, and your pancreas is going to get, signal, and insulin is going to release to nullify that extra glucose, which is going to be floating around in your blood. So they try to measure that, what the 2-hour postprandial glucola results would be. So after 2 hours, they're going to draw the blood again, blood glucose, and if the blood glucose now after 2 hours is less than 140 milligrams per deciliter, then one would be defined as normal. But if the 2-hour blood glucose comes between 140 to 199 milligram per deciliter, Of course, the parenthesis units are in SI units, international units. Then one would be defined as in pre-diabetic condition. And if it's greater than 200 milligram per deciliter, it's defined as 11.1 millimoles per liter. So this is the condition. Now, let me tell you what happened in my case. So I was, as I said earlier, that I was hovering around between 102 to 105, and my doctor has always been saying by this just fasting blood glucose number that, Nadir, you are fine, but I was not happy. So I went for, I calculated my 𝗠𝗲-IR first. I went for my fasting insulin. I calculated my 𝗠𝗲-IR. I went for the test OGTT 2-hour. So in my case, in OGTT, it came, my fasting blood glucose was 105, okay? My fasting blood glucose was 105, but after 2 hours of glucola drink, my blood glucose came as 100. Just think about it. My doctor was shocked when he saw that your fasting blood glucose was 105 and your 2-hour glucola blood glucose was less than actually your fasting blood glucose. So it means that my insulin come pretty quick. It came pretty quick, and it rescued my excess glucose from the blood. So that told me, my doctor, that I don't have any issue with the insulin resistance, and I'm pretty much insulin sensitive. So then I calculated my fasting, this 𝗠𝗲-IR, and I got less than 1 because my fasting blood glucose was close to 100 on a different occasion, because I said that it varies. It's not a fixed constant number, but it gives you a pretty good indication that where you are standing. So my 𝗠𝗲-IR was close to 0.96 here, and I was less than 1. So this gave me another confidence that I'm not in the camp of insulin resistance. I'm in the camp of insulin sensitive, because we know that this insulin resistance is the driver of all non-communicable diseases which we know of, including cancers, including heart disease, including dementia and Alzheimer's. Now they are tossing this term that Alzheimer's is nothing but it's a type 3 diabetes. So we have to make sure, first of all, that we are not in the camp of insulin resistance. So whatever it's in our power, we have to make sure that we are insulin sensitive to the best of our ability. Now, that next test, which is here, I listed here, 𝗀-peptide. It's a protein which our blood carries, and you go for a test and they measure this test. This protein tells us that how pancreas is functioning in producing the insulin, how efficient it is that your insulin production is. So it's a measure of your pancreatic function, how your pancreas is functioning. And the normal range, again, it depends on the lab where you are getting, because different labs have different normal ranges set up. But give and take, it's in the same parameter, same range. So normal range is 0.5 to 2.7 nanograms per milliliter. Now, according to the new research, experts are saying that 𝗀-peptide is a leading marker, a good marker for pancreatic cancer. So this is another marker for not only checking that how your pancreas is functioning in maintaining the homeostatic assessment between your glucose and your insulin. So 𝗀-peptide is a good test to perform, and I don't think mostly doctors would recommend by default. You have to ask for it, and I do it on a yearly basis, these tests. And I didn't do just once. I did it OGTT. I don't do it on a yearly basis because I don't like to gulp 75 milligrams of glucola every time I go for test, because it's a torture. So 𝗀-peptide I do every year. 𝗠𝗲-IR I calculate every year based on my every year fasting insulin and fasting blood glucose as well. and I do every year 𝗥𝗶𝗯𝗃. The last one here I listed here is a little bit detailed test. It's a assessment of over 3-hour period. So it's beyond the scope of this vlog, and hopefully I will touch in the next forthcoming vlogs, because I see that it's important for certain people who are on the borderline of insulin resistance or insulin sensitivity, and to see the whole picture, how your insulin assay is being written over 3-hour period time. So what they do normally, they give you a 100 grams of glucola to drink, and then they measure your fasting insulin, and after administrating the glucola, they measure half-hour insulin response, and at the same time they measure the glucose as well. And every half-hour interval up to 3 hours, they draw the blood, and they try to see that how your response of insulin, because after certain time your insulin should be almost to the minimum, as the fasting state. It shouldn't be floating around in the glucose in the blood, just after nullifying the glucose, because excess insulin which is floating around in the blood is not a good idea either, because that would be the case of hyperinsulinemia. So I will discuss in the future vlogs, Kraft insulin assay. That's why I don't want to touch it here, because it just lengthen the vlog. And let me stop share here. So basically what I did try to give you these are the different tests. Occasionally I will mention that what type of testing which we need to do, because remember that what we said earlier, we are trying to be proactive in our health, proactive rather than reactive, because we don't want to be declared insulin resistance, and we don't want to be in the camp of either pre-diabetic or diabetic condition, and when the symptoms appear, we go to the doctor and we are declared that you have this issue, and now you have to deal with it, because this is the drug you have to take forever, because I told you earlier that it's a lifestyle issue, and as I said in my previous vlog, that vitamin D is one of the leading player in making yourself insulin sensitivity and insulin sensitive. So of course, then your diet will follow suit. So you have to eat certain things, and we will talk about diet in separate vlogs, because I'm not touching everything here, but I just wanted to make sure that these tests are there at our disposal to use it effectively, because literature is enough there. Scientific literature is loaded with this information, but the point is that if the literature is there and scientific data is there, and if we are not using that information, that literature, to make sure that we are using that knowledge for the benefit of ourselves, then that is just information, that's just a literature. It's not, it doesn't do you any good. And I've tried all my these years that to utilize each and everything at my disposal, because my doctors never told me about all these tests. I digged information, I digged the literature, I verified it, I listened to the experts, I went through the periodicals and National Institute of Public Health database, and I looked at each and everything, and then I calibrated these tests on my own and my family members, and that's how we have been monitoring our health on a yearly basis. Last week, just on March 6th, I had my annual physical, and I had given my doctor a list of 27 tests. I haven't gone for test yet, because my test date is March 30th, and I will be doing my detailed 27 test, yearly test. And that's how we take care of our health to the best of our ability, as being a proactive, because whatever it's in our power, we can do it, because there are certain things which is beyond our power, which we don't have any control over it. I hope you will learn something from this information which I'm sharing here. And if you have any questions, any concerns about the information which I'm sharing, please put it in the comment. I try to reply within 24 hours to the best of my ability. And if I don't know, then I will try to find out some literature to give you a response if you have any questions. But make sure that don't ask me any of your own health condition, because I'm not a doctor, and refer to your doctor about your condition. And I'm trying to facilitate this literature understanding that as a consumer, because me and you are the same. I'm also a consumer, but I am a little bit frugal consumer, who does his due diligence to the best of his ability, whether it's a healthcare, it's personal finance, or it's education, or it's anything else. So I will bring it out to your attention if I find some literature about your concerns, and then you can take it up with your doctor and relate to your doctor. And I'm sure that you can form a partnership with your doctor. Hopefully, I will see you soon next week with another topic. See you then.